Leaders can't pour from an empty cup. Yet, so many in our educational systems, in our classrooms, and even running many of our boardrooms are running on fumes. And today I'm joined by someone that is an educational consultant, a resilience coach, and a founder of Thrive Well Consulting, a veteran Army officer, former counselor, and retired high school principal. And outside of that, she's lived the highs and lows of leadership. She now equips schools and school leaders and principals with practical tools to ultimately recharge, to build that resilience muscle, and to lead with strength. I'm excited about this conversation for a multitude of reasons, but I'm excited because this conversation is about moving from burnout to breakthrough and why thriving leaders create thriving schools. Welcome to another opportunity to listen into the Contagious Culture podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple. It's to help you create an ecosystem of academic excellence. Through inspiring conversations, practical strategies, and actionable insights, we empower educators, change makers, and leaders just like yourself. Do one thing: foster trust, collaboration, and provide them the tools, the resources, and the methodologies to create an ecosystem of academic excellence. Let's bring our guest on. Dr. Janet, how are you doing today? I'm so excited to see you.
Oh, I am so excited to be here as well. Thank you so much for this invitation, and kudos to you for all that you are doing to just make our communities better, help schools to thrive as well.
Oh, thank you so very much. I know we were talking offline, and we had a great conversation. And before we get into all of the questions that I have you, because your background, your your experience, and your resume is phenomenal, and I'm so excited to get into the meat of this conversation. But could you introduce yourself without using titles and talk about why you believe that you were put on this earth?
Oh, wow. What a great question. Well, I'm a native New Yorker, and I believe that I was placed on this earth to make sure that as other people have crossed my path, that their lives are a little bit better. And so I've been able to do that, whether it is as a veteran Army officer, whether it was working with abused kids before I came into education, or whether it was as a guidance counselor, a principal, or an adjunct professor. I believe that, like myself, all of us have a purpose in life, and that is that others' lives are better because they crossed our path, and that we leave a mark on this world. That's what I believe is my purpose, to build that resilience.
I love that. And when you think about building resilience, you've worn many hats, just like you communicated: an Army officer, counselor, principal, and now a consultant. How
Yes.
has each role shaped your passion for resilience and wellness, especially within education?
Wow. Well, I tell you, when I went to basic training as an enlisted soldier in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, I said, am I crazy? But I left that experience feeling the most resilient physically and mentally. And I left that 8-week experience realizing that, wow, if I have the right mindset and this machine that we call our body is ready to tackle the mission at hand, we can achieve anything. And as you know, as an educator, mindset is everything, and being able to take care of our bodies is everything as well, so that we can fulfill that. So when we consider the educational environment, right, it's fast paced, the technology, now we have AI, there's so much that is happening, and stress and burnout are all of the things that come into play. It impacts our lack of retention of educators, the early retirement of leaders in the school setting. And what has really compelled me in this work of well-being and emotional resilience is that several years ago, I was a school principal. My husband, who also was military, and my sons are military, he had a fatal heart attack passed away on a Monday in our home. And the American Red Cross, whom I've served on the board locally, they've done resiliency training, and I'm a mind-body facilitator in the past with them as well. But did you know, and did your audience realize that most heart attacks, particularly with educators, happen on a Sunday night or a Monday morning? And for us, our life was changed on that Monday morning. It was the last week of school. I was going into school to prepare for final exams for our students. And so when we don't look at how we build our emotional resilience and how we address stress and burnout, it can really impact our lives from the inside out, shorten our longevity, but also impact the culture and the climate of our schools. So I hope that with your listeners today, they realize, especially if they're leaders and educators, or even those in the corporate setting, that when you are able to strengthen your emotional resilience, when you are able to manage your stress and your burnout with several different strategies that are available and that I train folks on, then you become more productive. The school culture and climate improves, but also you're modeling the behavior that your faculty and staff can emulate. When I was a school principal of 2 schools, one was an alternative school that served 32 schools in this county that I was assigned to, and then one was a high school. And what you find, though, is that the leader, especially, as you know, sets the culture and the climate for the school. So if that leader is not managing their stress, if they're burned out, if they don't have work-life integration, we used to call it work-life balance, but there's no such thing as balance, right? And so it's the integration of our work and our life, our personal life, that really impacts the quality of life. So I've identified through some of the research that is out there, particularly through the NEA, the National Education Association, I've been able to identify in their resilience framework 6 key pain points that impact leaders that when they are addressed can enable them to be more productive, enable them to improve their school culture and climate, and most of all, be able to model behaviors that helps their faculty and staff as well.
There was so much in all that you just communicated, and there's so many ways that I can take this conversation. But I want to pull it back so that we can be able to move forward, because I think a lot of times we overlook the power and the value of the words that people communicate. And in order for us and our listeners right now to move forward, we have to be like a slingshot and pull them back. My question is, when you think about your 6 pain points, I definitely want you to get in there, but I also know that you speak about the 8 dimensions of wellness.
Yes, sir.
For leaders who feel overwhelmed. And recently, I've been with many principals and leaders reaching out to me, speaking about they're overwhelmed by their boards and their plans and all of these different things. Can you talk about the intersection between these 8 dimensions of wellness as well as the 6 pain points?
Absolutely. So what the research suggests is that the pain points, particularly of leaders, and of course, I believe that every teacher, every educator is a leader of their own lives, of their classroom, of the department that they may be actualized in their school. And so what the research suggests, and I have an acronym that I follow, the LEADER framework. And so the L stands for lack of support. Many school and district leaders and many faculty and staff, they feel isolated in their roles. They lack adequate backing from their peers and administration, which affects their ability to cope with challenges. I can remember very, very much, even as an administrator or as a guidance counselor, or when I've been working on behalf of the school and the community, sometimes you feel like you're on an island by yourself, especially as you move up in leadership. Then the E in leader, it represents emotional support. Oftentimes, as leaders, we're required to manage not only the administrative responsibilities, but also the emotional needs of the staff and students. Why did we get into education, right? We wanted to make an impact on young people and on the future. Well, there requires an emotional toll. And some folks in the audience may have heard of compassion fatigue, which we usually hear that assigned to those in healthcare. But that type of fatigue, the compassion, the emotional fatigue also exists in education, because we want to make an impact. However, the administrative load, the support of students, the support of faculty definitely can have an emotional impact. I can remember in my 21 years in education, the impact on the school when you had a student suicide, or a child has reported that they're being abused, or a faculty member has passed away suddenly, or even after a long illness. Then the A in the L.E.A.D.E.R 6 pain points is adapting to change. Now, if there's anything constant for educators, it's change. All it takes is leaving school at the end of the year, and over the summer you come back to pre-planning and you realize all of these things that has to be taken care of. And if you're an administrator, you might have gotten 1 or 2 weeks, depending on if you were elementary, middle, or high, or alternative setting. But the adapting to change involves having to adapt to new educational policies, from the federal government to the state to the local. The technology, of course, that's ever changing. And that the learning environments that we're in, I've served in alternative settings, but then also, which was K-12, but then also traditional settings. And being in different environments or different grade levels can create uncertainty. It can cause anxiety amongst leaders as well as educators as they strive to maintain a positive school culture. Then the D in leaders represents demands and stress. The numerous responsibilities that we face as educators and leaders, including managing the staff, fulfilling the administrative roles, especially responding to our district leaders, right, contributes to high levels of stress and pressure. Then the E is the excessive time constraints. When I presented to different groups, whether it was educators or entrepreneurs, one of the things that I have said is, guess what? We all have the same 24 hours in a day, like Warren Buffett, Oprah Winfrey, the leaders that we want to emulate for various reasons. And so those time constraints definitely provides for overwhelming workloads that often leave leaders with very little time for self-care. I mentioned earlier in terms of my late husband, who passed away from a heart attack, and he was only 52. And that heart attack changed the trajectory for my sons, for myself, and I had to shift. And that is one of the main reasons you asked earlier about my purpose. My purpose was really propelled by realizing that educators oftentimes are individuals who become ill because they don't take care of that self-care. They burn the candle on both ends until they burn out in the middle, but they keep on going because they have students that rely on them. As leaders, you have faculty and staff that relies on you. You have district administrators you're being held accountable to. So I really promote the need for school districts to embrace the emotional resilience, professional development training and self-care, which is beyond getting manicures and massages. And that's where those 8 dimensions of wellness come in, because it was transformational for myself as I applied those dimensions on my life after leaving education. And I wish that I had done it while in education, and I wish that my husband had as well. And then finally, the R in the L.E.A.D.E.R framework of identifying those 6 pain points is the risk of burnout. Did you know that continuous exposure to stress and the lack of support can lead to burnout for district administrators, building level principals? And when they experience this, it could really have a negative impact on the productivity of that administrator and of those teachers. And ultimately, it can have a negative impact on the school culture and climate. If you show me a burned out teacher, certainly you may or an administrator, certainly you may end up seeing an impact on a negative impact possibly on school improvement desires and initiatives, an impact on how the school culture and climate may not be as positive as it can be, and definitely an impact on student achievement. So when we look at those 6 indicators, it's so important for us to also consider how the 8 dimensions of wellness may be a strategic way to be able to impact those.
That's such a powerful framework. And I just want to recap it. Lack of support, emotional support,
emotional labor, yes.
Emotional labor, adapting to change, demands and stress, excessive time constraints, and risk and burnout. And I
Yes.
and I want to stay on burnout for a second because burnout is such a common theme across schools.
Mhm.
What are some early signs or some early warning signs that leaders should look out for in themselves and also their teams?
Oh, absolutely. Fantastic question. Some of the early signs of burnout, and burnout is having overwhelming stress that may not be addressed at this time. It may be irritability, short fuse, some may describe it as. It may also be calling out sick, coming in late because you're not waking up on time or you're staying up late. And so, of course, when you are burning out, you have less energy and fuel to bring to the table and to think clearly. You may start to notice relationship problems because really being an educator and being a leader can really be all consuming. And usually the people impacted the most are those at home, right? As well as those who may work very closely with us. So when we look at the irritability, the lack of sleep, the time constraint, the not being able to have a positive mindset, all of those things contribute to how we relate to people. And at the end of the day, everything we do, the things that we do purposefully and the things that we are embracing because we're passionate about, they involve relationships. If we think back to that teacher who had the biggest impact on us or inspired us to be the best that we can be, it might not have been the subject that they taught, but it was how we felt when we were around that person. And that person had a lot of enthusiasm, had a lot of energy. But why should those kinds of qualities just be for the new teacher entering education? What happens to that tenured and that seasoned teacher who has been here a while and they want to stay? They're maybe at the 25-year point, right? They want to stay for that extra 5 years, but they are burned out for a number of reasons. Well, the only thing we have control over, Mr. King, is ourselves. I often tell people that life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond to it. And I contend that when we pour into ourselves and build our emotional resilience and look at where we fall, excuse me, on those scales of wellness, we are then pouring into ourselves and our cup doesn't get as empty and we have a full cup to be able to pour into those, whether it's our faculty, our staff, our school, our community initiatives. Being an educator and being a leader is not a 9-to-5 job. You don't clock in. It's a 24-hour experience. And we have to build our emotional resilience and address burnout. And one way to do that is being aware of those 8 dimensions of wellness that was researched back in the 1970s by the National Wellness Institute. And what they looked at was, how can we live a holistic life? Not just for those in corporate or nonprofit or in education, but how can we live our best life? Because here's the thing for us to consider, Mr. King. As an educator, as a leader, as an active community person, if we knew that today was our last day, like what happened with my late husband on that Monday, the last week of school, how would we be living our lives differently now? We would be thinking about the people that we left behind. We would be thinking about how we wish we had taken better care of ourselves. And we would be thinking of, if we had to do it all over again, how would I live my life more productively? And that's what these dimensions of wellness and Thrive Well focuses on, looking at those pain points, looking at where you fall within those 8 dimensions, and figuring out for yourself, how can I make the rest of my life to be the best of my life?
Oftentimes, this process that you speak of is looked at to be selfish. I know,
That's true.
and this is me even speaking to me, and I've even had colleagues and mentors refrain from even being able to communicate to me in that way, and I recognize that it did lead me to burnout. It did lead me to feeling overwhelmed and gaining weight and stressed and all of these various things. So I guess my question is, what do you say to those educators who feel that focusing on their own wellness is selfish or a luxury they can't afford?
Wow, that really is a heartfelt point that you just made. And what I would tell them is what comes to mind is a quote from L.E.A.D.E.R, who describes herself as an activist. And she is quoted as saying, self-care isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. And that is so true. And in the beginning of our conversation, I also mentioned how if we imagine ourselves as a cup, and our cup continues to get empty based on all of those 6 points that I mentioned that can burn us out, and we never fill our cups. Well, look at the self-care and the well-being as the way of filling our cups. But if we never fill the cup, then our cup continues to get depleted and get empty. And then we have nothing to be able to give to the schools that we lead, the communities that we're in, and the initiatives that we're trying to fulfill for our faculty and staff and our students. So I say to that educator who says, well, self-care sounds selfish. And I've heard that, in the past, might have been a few different words that they used to describe it. But at the end of the day, this life that we're living, it's no dress rehearsal on this level of what we call Earth. This is no dress rehearsal. And so we can live long, but how long do you want to live and have an improved quality of life? There are so many people who enter education in their early 20s and they're able to retire in their early 50s or mid 50s. And guess what? That means, God willing, you have at least another 30, 40 years to go. Well, if you spent a good 20, 30 years not taking care of yourself and pouring into yourself, what will be the quality of that next chapter of your life? I have heard of, I forgot to mention, other than my late husband and his experience as a middle school assistant principalship that he did not survive, I also knew a middle school principal getting ready to go to work, did not report to work. Her secretary called the local police to do a wellness check because that was not like her. We would all go in rather than use leave when we are burned out. When the police arrived at her home, she was between her front door and her car, expired. I also knew of a high school principal who had a fatal heart attack in his office. And when people go to the homegoing services, everyone has glowing things to say, but it's that family and the loved ones who experience the greatest loss. So self-care is not selfish. It is self-preservation. A quote by L.E.A.D.E.R.
You've said before that leadership, which I love when you said this even earlier, that leadership directly impacts school culture, especially when it's talking about wellness. It directly impacts school culture, especially school results and outcomes. Can you talk about what are some of the things that we need to implement as leaders, as teachers, on a day-to-day basis so that we can be more mindful of this, so that we can ensure that we're producing at a high level while still taking care of ourselves?
Oh my, great question. I would say that as leaders, what we can do on the school level, and I'm now putting on my school guidance counselor hat, right? Because in the course of my years in education, before I went into administration, I've served as a middle school and alternative school and a high school counselor. And I think that creates a unique skill set going into leadership in terms of communication. But I think that not all leaders may have that skill set. And so it's so important that at the school building level, that you create an environment where faculty and staff can speak authentically to you. Now, yes, you may want to have an open door policy, but you just can't the way that you would like to. So carve out time during a faculty meeting where there is an opportunity for you to share what are some things that are happening right in the school? Because we could spend a lot of time about what we want to see change. But guess what? You can't live a positive life focusing on negativity. So whether it's part of a faculty meeting or whether it's part of a different opportunity of coming together, spend time focusing on what's happening right in your school building and how we can impact that. Another thing that I would like to share is, of course, as a principal, our district office had us with wellness programs, right? Or we had to implement that in the school. Well, I encourage those out there to realize that having a wellness program is more than just having fruit drinks in a machine and making sure there's no candy at the faculty meetings. It involves making sure that everyone has buy-in to what does it look like to be able to be healthy. Whether that is having a program in the school where there's mindfulness, whether that is having on your professional development training calendar for the year, social emotional learning, whether that is having on your training program for the year, mind-body types of activities before a faculty meeting, or the professional development itself is about mind and body. When I was a principal in an alternative school, which I mentioned earlier, served 32 schools in my former school district, in my office, and this is one of the dimensions of wellness, environmental wellness. In my office, I had subdued lighting. I had the sound of water playing in the background. I had the sound of low music playing as well, because your environment, whether it's the music, the aromatherapy, whether it's pictures on the wall that inspire you, it's so important that as leaders, we also create an environment in our school that inspires, that calms, that really help everyone to feel this is a healthy place to be. And I get it. I understand. It's difficult, but it has to be done for the retention of your teachers to be able to stay in this environment. I'm sure that there are those in your audience who can think of that leader or that department head and they say, if they left this school, I'm going with them because I look forward to going to work every day because they were there. So that's just a couple of things to consider. But definitely the professional development should include something that involves mind, body, so that when those stressful days come and that stressful opportunity, teachers learn strategies to be able to step back. I like to teach breathing types of guided meditation. Yoga is definitely beneficial. Some school districts do incorporate that. The teachers go to it after school. So just those kinds of things.
Your book, Thrive, Recharge, and Rise, offers tools for leaders like me, busy leaders. What is one practice from your book that has not only helped someone else, but also has personally transformed your own leadership journey?
Oh my gosh. Wonderful, wonderful. Imagine this acronym called SAVERS, right? And I was inspired when I read the book years ago, Miracle Morning by Ron Elrod.
Yeah.
And that acronym was transformational for me. And it also lit in me some of the things that I encourage folks to look at. Now, I'm a morning person. Now, whether or not that was because I was in the Army and there used to be a commercial that said, we do more before 9 o'clock than most people do all day. Well, I felt that way as a high school principal. But for those, and you may know of the lifesavers, and I've incorporated some of that and fleshed it out some in the book as well. Starting your day in the morning lays the foundation for the rest of the day. And I've actually watched podcasts and read books about other people who earn more than educators who have said the same thing, that first hour of their day sets the tone for those who are being successful in the course of their day. But for those in your audience who may not have heard of Ron Elrod or Miracle Morning, and they may be going out to look at Thrive, Recharge, and Rise, the essence SAVERS stands for silence. Start your morning with some form of silence. And for me, that's prayer and about 5 minutes of guided meditation. What that does is that helps to calm us down. It helps us to be able to get centered and focused. Then the A in SAVERS is affirmations. Words have power. Scripture talks about the power of words, the power of the tongue. And so have an affirmation that drives you. I remember I was doing a professional development for a local elementary school, and one young lady uses scriptures, as her affirmations, and for her, it was, I am enough, or I am bringing my best self to the table, or I know that this too shall pass and this is how I will make this work. The V in lifesavers, the V in SAVERS is visualization. For any of us who have ever worked in the school, you have coaches, right? And what do coaches do with their athletes? They help them to visualize with the end in mind. When I was an officer in the military, my commander talked about, this is what we have to accomplish, the mission we have to accomplish. Let's do backward planning. How do we get to this point? Well, visualization enables you first thing in the morning to pinpoint how you would like to see the day go. And I suggest just pick out 2 or 3 things that you may feel you have control over. Now, as a former principal, I know that I can have my agenda for the day, and all it takes is a fight on the bus, and everything is turned helter-skelter, right? The E in Savers is exercise. And for me, that meant having a walk around the lake before I went into work. As a matter of fact, my first book that I wrote, How Much Joy is in Your Journey, came as a result of after I did that walk, I would talk inside of my phone and just articulate how I feel one with the world and one with the universe, and what does joy mean for me as a school leader. And that book became more like a self-coaching book. The V for visualization, the E for exercise. So whatever that may be, for some it may be yoga, for others it may be going to the gym in the morning, but I like a little bit more solitude and feel as though I have control. Then we have the R, which is reading. I tell you, now, after I finished my doctoral program, because that's a terminal degree in so many ways, right? But once I finished that program back in 2009, I believe, what I found was that when I got my Audible app, my car became my professional development space.
That's
And
good.
so that is so important. Whether we're a corporate nonprofit or in the education industry, that we continue learning. That's what keeps us sharp, and that's what keeps us on our purpose and being able to help others. And then finally, the S in Savers is scribing. And by that, I mean journaling. And for me, the effective form of journaling was gratitude journaling. I loved being in education after being in the military and doing things in nonprofit after the military. However, when I became widowed and was empty nested and was downsizing my life and starting on this new path, I sometimes experienced depression or anxiety. I remember a number of educators who have shared, well, being in education wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or I'm not paid what I thought I was going to be paid. I want to go and do something else before it's too late. Well, when we practice gratitude journaling, for me, it was transformational because it helped me to focus on what was happening right in my life. At that point, when I left education, I did not have a full house of family to come home to because I was now a widow and my sons have moved on to live their lives. But when I started looking at what was happening right in my life, and expressing each day 3 things that I was grateful for that was different, I started to realize that, yes, I still had a purpose. Yes, I am still an educator. And yes, there is a way for me to take my tragedy and turn it into triumph, take my pain and turn it into purpose, and be able to help individuals who may have felt hopeless because of drastic changes in their lives, that now they can feel hopeful. And so that's what was transformational for me, and bits and pieces of that I've incorporated into my book.
This conversation has been like a masterclass on how to be more resilient. And it's interesting because there's certain people that you talk to and get in a room with that truly have a light to them that you feel. And on this podcast, we talk about the energy you bring as the culture you create. And I always say to educators, what type of culture are you spreading? Do you have a belief so much in your students to succeed that they begin to believe that they can succeed? Do you have a belief in your teachers that they will prevail and they will hurdle over those obstacles enough so that they can just start to do it without you having to tell them to do it? Yes. And contagious culture, oftentimes what's contagious in schools is gossip and negativity. And I love what you said earlier. You can't live a positive life resting in negativity or living in negativity. And I love all that you've communicated today. And it reminds me of what you have planned in October. You're hosting a leadership wellness panel. And yes, I guess the question is, what do you hope that people walk away with from that experience?
Oh, thank you for that. I almost forgot to even mention it myself. What I hope that people walk away with is, especially district leaders, school leaders, is, you know what? I need to look at where is my well-being. And I need to go ahead and contact Dr. Janae to come in and be part of our professional development plan. But outside of that, looking at what does well-being look like? And so I know we're about to wrap up, and I want to go ahead and throw out to the audience, because some may be saying, well, what are those 8 pillars or dimensions of wellness? Well, one is your emotional wellness, right? And so, of course, we all as educators, we're aware of Mental Health Awareness Month, but nobody oftentimes talk about the mental health awareness of educators. And so emotional wellness involves understanding, managing, and expressing our emotions effectively while developing our resilience. Then there's the occupational wellness, right? Yes, believe it or not, sometimes we have folks in education that says, I don't like being an educator. So I oftentimes told groups, education is such a noble profession to be in. And once an educator, always an educator. But one of the things that for those of you who may be having an entrepreneurial inclination, then let your 9 to 5 pave the way for your 5 to 9, right? That thing that lights you up at 5 to 9 that you would do even if you weren't paid for, realize that what you're doing now, whether it's as a nonprofit person or a corporate or in education, is paving the way for that. Then we have physical wellness, which I talked a little bit about earlier, making sure that you keep this machine right. And what the research says is, we have to look at our hydration, we have to look at our physical fitness, and something that we lack oftentimes as educators, our sleep quality. But that's a conversation for another day. Then there's social wellness. The research talks about social wellness is 2-pronged. It is built on relationships, our professional relationships and our personal relationships. Well, so often, because we're focused on our certifications and our degrees and moving up in education, our personal relationships fall on the back end. That may affect our partnerships, our marriages, our relationship with our kids. So that social wellness is something that we have to look at. Then there's intellectual wellness. And that was referred to a little bit earlier as well. Read or listen to Audible. Go to professional development opportunities. Tune in to Contagious Culture, right? Join the Culture Lab. These are opportunities to improve your intellectual wellness and stay relevant. I'm going to be sitting in on an AI summit tomorrow because I need to know about these things that are occurring. Then there's spiritual wellness. And I tell folks that spiritual wellness doesn't just ascribe to what religious denomination that you ascribe to, but it's finding purpose and meaning in life. And Mr. King, you opened up our conversation today about what is my purpose. And, when we all determine what our why is, then everything begins to fall into place. Environmental wellness is more than just recycling and doing things for, our environment out in the community, but how do you have your space support you emotionally? And then finally, financial wellness. Now, I don't know if I'm the only one who was surprised when I came into education what the paycheck looked like, but that is just another reason, though, to look at how you continue getting advanced degrees or certifications or positions, but also budgeting and learning how to invest in yourself. I remember years ago, as I close on this point, watching the Oprah Winfrey Show when she was doing her talk show, and I was so inspired. She showed a woman who was a 25-year educator who was about to retire and was a millionaire. And Oprah was flabbergasted. She said, how did you become a millionaire as an educator? And she said, it involved living within my means. It involved making investments. It involved making investments that had compound interest. And I said, okay, I want some of that.
Yeah.
And there you go.
As you look ahead, what do you see the future of leadership wellness looking like? Like how will wellness shape the future of education?
Wow, that's a good one. That is a good one. I see wellness as shaping the future in a way that it contributes to the longevity of leaders.
Hmm.
I see wellness as an opportunity where hopefully no one comes on your platform sharing their experience of a leader who did not survive going to their car or who had expired in their office. I see wellness as an opportunity to improve the school culture and climate because it is about mind, body, and soul, right? And when you spend so many hours in an educational environment, connecting those 3 points is a good thing. I see the impact of wellness on education in terms of improving school culture and climate, which in turn can have a positive impact on student achievement. And ultimately, as well, just as importantly, the teacher retention. That is the key thing. Now, granted, those educators who may come from a 2-income family, many of them stay the course. And I know that it can be a struggle for a new teacher who may be a sole earner in their household. But at the end of the day, if we look at wellness as a way of empowering the leadership and empowering the faculty and staff, it will have a positive impact on the school culture and climate. It will have a positive impact on productivity of leadership and faculty. And most importantly, it can also have a positive impact on student achievement. So that's what I hope for, that when I say, let's make the rest of our lives the best of our lives, that really goes back to our social wellness, make the rest of our professional relationships and achievements better, as well as making it personally, our personal lives better, because they're really all interconnected. Even those eight pillars, those 8 dimensions, it's all interconnected. When you walk out in nature, that's taking care of your physical wellness, your emotional wellness, your spiritual wellness. It's all interconnected. And so by incorporating that into your professional development, or at least the awareness, that's the first step.
There's somebody listening right now that feels like they're running on fumes, that feels like they're running on empty, and they've taken their foot off the gas and they're allowing the car to cruise until they get to whatever destination that their car is going to allow them to get. What do you have to say to that person?
That is an unfortunate but yet powerful observation of what actually does exist. What I would say is and I'm speaking from my own experience, that you need a community of support. And that community of support could be other teachers, other educators who are struggling. As a leader, oftentimes I have felt like I was on an island by myself. To say that I was struggling, whether it was in any of these areas of well-being, I was reluctant to share that with my supervisor and assistant superintendent, because as a leader, you do not want the district to feel that you can't handle it. As an educator, as a school counselor, as a social worker, as a special ed teacher, it is important that we look at having a community of support. And so whether that's a group that you're a member of, that you all are on a text message chain and say, whoo, today was a hard day. What happened right for anybody in this group? That gives you hope. If it's a matter of joining an online community, that gives you hope and that pours into your cup. But also, if you have that relationship, and I hope that you do, a relationship with your direct supervisor, whether it is your department chair, whether it is the assistant principal who evaluates or supervises you, or whether it's your principal, or it might be a coach in the school, go to them and say, you know what, I'm struggling. Because when I began to do that, what I found was I wasn't the first person who had that experience. It wasn't just unique to me. And when you realize that, that improves oftentimes your social well-being, that improves the wellness in your environment, because you know you're not in this alone, that improves your emotional well-being as well. And I encourage educators also, go ahead and pursue therapy, whether it's a psychiatrist, a psychologist, all of that supports our mental health. Or maybe it's a coach who specializes not in therapy, but specializes in you looking at what is the next thing that you can do, or what can you do outside of education that really lights you up and really supplements your life, both intellectually and perhaps even financially. It is so important that we realize we're not going on this journey alone by ourselves. And when we realize that we have a community that is there encouraging us and pushing us along, that helps. The other thing that was helpful to me was having inspirational quotes around my office, around my home, in my planner, things to remind me. One thing that one of my sons pointed out when they came across this folder was, I have a thank you folder. And every year that I had cards from either students or parents or teachers, I looked back and I said, okay, maybe I did do some good. So those are the things that I would encourage, that community of support, having things around you that pour in and inspire you. It may even be just a picture of your grandparent. It may be getting help. Mental health is real, and it's real for educators especially.
Where can we find you? Like, how can listeners that have heard all of the value that you've shared from the multitude and decades of experience that you possess, how can they support your mission? Because what I've heard in this conversation is a consistent pouring of not just information, but your soul, your experiences, your guidance, your direction, but then
Yes.
also your hope for educators. You've planted so many seeds in this conversation, and I believe when seeds are planted, it's up to us to be able to nurture so that we can harvest the fruit that we can be able to provide for other people. So how can we support you, and where can we find you?
Oh, wonderful. Well, you can certainly find me on my website at www.drjanetbishop.com. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram under Dr. Janae Bishop or Dr. Janae Bishop-Nesbit. And please feel free to reach out to me. If you'd like to email me personally, then definitely janet@drjanetbishop.com. At the end of the day, send me a DM through any of those social media opportunities. I would love to be able to have a free consultation with anyone, and especially to be able to do some professional development in this important work that we've talked about today.
Dr. Janet, I just want to give you your flowers publicly. The work that you're
Thank you.
doing, the research that you've done, the information that you've provided, but then also the heart of harvest that you possess to be able to show up for educators despite the challenges that you've experienced both personally and professionally, speaks volumes of the type of human being and the woman that you are. And I just say thank you for the work that you're doing and the energy that you bring. And I'm prayerful and hopeful that people hear this, receive this, and begin to implement this, and we can change our educational systems. Anybody listening right now, I want you to like, subscribe, and follow this podcast, the Contagious Culture Podcast, on all platforms. But before you take care of me, I want you to take care and buy 3 copies of Dr. Janet's book. And then I want you to also hire her to speak or to coach or to present at your school. My leaders that are listening in, don't hire me yet, hire her. Because I know that what you need is the conversation that we just had. A question that I always ask at the end of every conversation is, what type of culture am I spreading? The energy you bring is the culture you create. Make yours worth catching. We'll see you all next episode.